Okay, Robby, what's on your radar?
Well, earlier this week, a Jewish co-host of CBS Mornings conducted a somewhat hostile interview with a prominent critic of Israel. Now, there shouldn't be anything particularly notable about this. It is, after all, the job of journalists to ask probing questions and for skilled thinkers to address them. And yet, the episode has produced a meltdown, a total ongoing meltdown at CBS, with some staffers apparently demanding that the network take action to punish the interviewer. And they seem to have gotten their way, at least up until a point. The host, Tony Dokoupil, had to meet with the network's standards and practices team, as well as its race and culture unit, according to the New York Times. Now, during an internal staff conversation that was leaked to the Free Press and other news outlets, network executives asserted that Dokoupil had failed to meet editorial standards. CBS even planned to invite a mental health expert, DEI strategist, and trauma trainer to attend the staff conversation and offer guidance. Oh, goody. Now, these plans were scrapped after drawing widespread and well-deserved ridicule on social media. We'll circle back to that in a minute. But look, the very idea that a journalist grilling an opinionated guest is somehow a lapse of journalistic integrity is ridiculous. It's one thing to critique the premises of Dokoupil's line of questioning, which you can certainly do, or contend that his presumptions were unfair to the pro-Palestine perspective. Sure. It's quite another to demand protection from such questions vis-a-vis some kind of media safe space. Here we go again. Now note, and this is important, the guest himself, the progressive journalist Ta-Nehisi Coats, has not expressed much outrage about how he was treated in the interview. On the contrary, he told Trevor Noah that he wasn't insulted. In fact, Coats expected to come into conflict with a supporter of Israel during his promotional media tour. In truth, he probably welcomed it because nothing sells books quite like controversy. Now, Coats is known for penning provocative essays on the topics of race, including The Case for Reparations and Donald Trump is the First White President. His new book, The Message, is partly about his visit to the West Bank. He concludes that Israel is an intensely racist country and is guilty of a moral crime against the Palestinians. Those views faced vehement pushback on Monday's episode of CBS Mornings, where Coats appeared to promote the book. Dokoupil, one of three co-hosts alongside Gayle King and Nate Burleson, took control of the interview and asked Coats a series of aggressive questions about the book's anti-Israel assumptions. A convert to Judaism, Dokoupil is the father of two children who live in Israel with their mother. He said the content of that section, he's talking to Coats and referring to part of the book that does concern Israel, he says would not be out of place in the backpack of an extremist. Later, Dokoupil asked Coats what bothered him about the existence of a Jewish state. Coats took these questions in stride. He asserted that he was opposed to any nation granting preferential treatment based on ethnicity or religious identity, and he described Israel as an apartheid state. When asked about the Palestinians' culpability in violence against Israel, he replied that Israel's reactions in Gaza and the West Bank were morally illegitimate. Coats said, "I am against a state that discriminates against people on the basis of ethnicity. There is nothing the Palestinians could do that would make that okay for me." Coats also contended that pro-Israel voices have no problem getting their views out in the media, whereas Palestinian sympathizers are underrepresented. Let's watch some of the interview.
I have to say, when I read the book, I imagine if I took your name out of it, took away the awards and the acclaim, took the cover off the book, the publishing house goes away, the content of that section would not be out of place in the backpack of an extremist. And so then I found myself wondering, why does Ta-Nehisi Coats, who I've known for a long time, read his work for a long time, very talented, smart guy, leave out so much? Why leave out that Israel is surrounded by countries that want to eliminate it? Why leave out that Israel deals with terror groups that want to eliminate it? Why not detail anything of the first and the second intifada, the cafe bombings, the bus bombings, the little kids blown to bits? And is it because you just don't believe that Israel, in any condition, has a right to exist?
Well, I would say the perspective that you just outlined, there is no shortage of that perspective in American media.
Now, the entire segment lasted about 7 minutes. As far as debates about Israel and Palestine go, I give this one maybe a 3 out of 10 on the spiciness scale. For some truly rancorous debates on this subject, you could watch Alan Dershowitz versus Norm Finkelstein. You could watch Eli Lake versus Jay Klein. You could watch Brianna Joy Gray versus me on this program every day for 6 months of last year. Now, that was not all. Dokoupil attempted to get his jabs in. Coats remained unflustered, and viewers can make up their own minds about how they thought it went and who they agree with. Now, social media erupted in response. Fans of Dokoupil and supporters of Israel were pleased that he pressed Coats so ardently, while fans of Coats and supporters of Palestine were annoyed about the tone of the interview. And it's true that the interview was not nearly as breezy and fluffy as the standard fare on CBS Mornings, but on the other hand, co-host Gayle King once asked the father of an Israeli hostage about Israel's responsibility for the deaths of Palestinian children on that same show. Look, this is all fine. If you enter the arena of a media interview, you have to be prepared for tough or even agenda-driven questions. What's not fine is the behavior of CBS staff, who evidently complained about the interview, initiating a sort of struggle session for Tony Dokoupil. At the staff meeting on Tuesday, multiple staff members shed tears over what had happened, according to the Free Press. Some colleagues did come to Dokoupil's defense. Jan Crawford, legal correspondent at CBS News, rejected the idea that norms of journalism had been breached. She said, when someone comes on air with a one-sided account of a very complex situation, as Coats himself acknowledges that he has, it's my understanding that as journalists, we're obligated to challenge that worldview so that our viewers can have access to the truth or to a fuller account. To me, that's what Tony did. Also, Sherry Redstone, the chair of CBS's parent company, Paramount Global, said that Dokoupil did a good job. I think he handled himself and showed the world and modeled what civil discourse is, she said. In contrast, the very silliest responses to this affair came, of course, from the network itself, which briefly considered bringing in a man named Dr. Donald Grant to console staff members during the Tuesday meeting. Grant describes himself as a, quote, mental health expert, DEI strategist, and trauma trainer. His own Instagram page, however, is not exactly a portrait of positive mental health. The plan to involve him was quickly aborted because his Instagram had pictures of Republican Senator Tim Scott as a racist Uncle Tom caricature, other insane and hateful pictures. Oopsie. What exactly can we learn from this kerfuffle? Look, it appears to be the case that major media organizations still feel pressured to cave to their most easily offended staff members and still think DEI hucksters provide a quick fix for discontentment. These are not healthy operating procedures. Let interviewers feud with their guests when they are inclined to do so. No one was harmed during the making of this episode of television. And this is an ongoing situation because even after I wrote this, there's more reporting from a variety of outlets that the furor within CBS is ongoing. They're now trying to say that Tony Dokoupil didn't follow proper procedures because he deviated from a prepared list of questions that producers had made. I don't want to demystify how TV is made for the audience, but yes, producers suggest questions for us.
Yeah.
They're talking to us as we're interviewing people, and oftentimes we do get in questions that they're suggesting to us, and oftentimes because of the nature of the conversation, we deviate wildly from what is prepared, and you have genuine moments, and it makes for good television, and that's what our jobs is. And it's fine. The idea that it is violating some, established thing to go off script and ask something the guest wasn't quite prepared for, that is just utter nonsense.
Well, first of all, I think we have much wider range to include controversial or inflammatory opinions than you necessarily do on a network.
Well, that's
or a
'cause we're
broadcast
cooler.
morning show. Obviously, we're cooler.
And that's why they watch.
Stating the obvious. Look, I didn't particularly care for Dokoupil's approach in the interview, but where I take your point is the idea that he should be somehow officially sanctioned for that I found pretty ludicrous. This could be found in an extremist backpack thing. I thought that was kind of a snide question, but look, I've been in contentious interviews as the interviewer. I'm sure some people thought my questions were snide on occasion. That's fine, and let it play out. I actually noted that a lot of people thought the interview overall played into Ta-Nehisi Coats' overall point, which was that the basic assumptions that underpin the pro-Israel case are very well heard and often dominant ones.
And Coats wasn't unhappy
Not at
with the
all.
line of questioning. I thought he handled himself very well, and he's going to sell more books because of this.
And I'm sure he anticipated that at least one of the interviews he was doing promoting the book was going to be this way and was clearly prepared for it. So, good on him. And I wrote like a whole book about this topic. I encourage people to check it out if you're interested. It's called The Snowflakes Revolt, but it is about the exportation of the campus safe space culture into American media, where you have these low-level staffers who believe that it's their job to advance a narrative rather than to seek truth and abide by journalistic principles, which would mean being curious and exploring different perspectives. And they have managed to somehow seize a lot of power within newsrooms by going to HR, complaining to management, bitching on social media. I mean, all of these tactics that they take to pressure executives into bending to their will. And the result is that we have incidents like this on a near constant basis. I mean, look at what happened with the Tom Cotton op-ed at the New York Times. It's a consistent trend where executives feel like they have to cater to the offense taken by the most low-level staff.
And every time I think there's no way a media organization is going to go through this embarrassing, self-flagellating ritual again, and then it always happens again.
But I just want to pick up on Amber's point, though, because I think there's something really important there, which is as a sort of someone who came up in a previous generation among, liberal academia and all of that, it seems to me that the tolerance for uncomfortable conversations has been reduced, and I'm in favour of uncomfortable conversations so long as they are civil and so long as they're not just in the realm of fantasy. You and I have had previous conversations about false information or defamatory information, and I think I would draw the lines in a different way than you would in that respect. But that's about information that is actively false. The idea that because someone is offended or hurt or uncomfortable about a line of questioning, that seems crazy to me and seems like it's obviously going to have a chilling effect on the capacity to properly discuss important things.
Well said. We'll be back with more Rising right after this.